Yeah.
I know the difference.
Do
I'm a sensitive guy.
For today's session, it's another interactive one, and we're going to be looking at storage and presentation, and that includes labeling as well. So I think it's just a bit of an extension of what we were talking about last time with the cataloging and so on. And being an interactive session, anybody that wants to show what they do or how they do things and whatever, that would be good. I know that Paul's got something he's going to walk us through, which is going to take somewhere between 5 and 50 minutes, I suppose.
Yeah, somebody stop me.
Might just do what I normally do, which I'll just bring up a couple of photos of some of my stuff just to open up the right thing first. Okay, so now you can see just one photo.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So this is the set of drawers that is behind my right shoulder. You can just see the top of. It's got a cabinet sitting on top of it, and they're an old set of what we know here as Taz oak, which is a eucalypt, and it was originally in a school as an art supplies cabinet, so they're quite deep drawers, and they can hold, I think it's 470 micro boxes in each drawer, and there's 10 drawers. So I'll show you visually.
How do you get 500 in there?
Well,
Big hammer.
Put two in a box.
you could do that, or you probably just have a couple of gaps, or they're in some other place. But I'll tell you a bit about that anyway, because one of the mistakes that I made early on with my cataloging is I didn't use different number sequences for different size boxes. So
Oh.
anyway, that's one. This one here is a set of 20 drawers on each side, and this has got obviously larger specimens in. This was, I don't know what it was originally used for, but I came across it in a collectibles store.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's quite good. They're not very deep, but it's over on the side here. They're probably about as deep as they are wide, so the width of that drawer is about the same as the depth, but it certainly can hold a few specimens. Then of course I've got lots of flats, so
Yes.
that's just a few of them over in my. I'm in bedroom 3. It's the rock wall, and over on that side there is a wardrobe.
Just like all of us, you have to live for 120 years.
Yeah. So the biggest issue that I have is if I want to get something out of box RD, I've actually got to remove all of those first to get to it. So, but it's still this is one of the things I wanted to talk about a bit as well. My collection started off as probably with most people where I just collected lots of everything. And these days, as you can see there, I've got a lot of material. And it's more of a reference collection than, say, a display collection for a large part. And I do need to go through and reduce and get rid of duplicates. And sometimes it's a bit hard because you'll have, 2 or 3 or 4 specimens of the same mineral from the same locality, but they're all unique because that's the way that it just happens. So, what do you do with those? And then I've got a couple of cabinets. This is from IKEA. It's got 3 shelves, including the bottom one. And my intention was to sort of rotate things in and out of there periodically, but I tend not to do that, so it's a bit of a mess. But it's a nice place to, as you walk into the room, to show somebody that doesn't know anything about minerals, and they see lots of color and whatever, and it's good from that perspective.
Steve, are those specimens labeled themselves, or are they not labeled and that's why they're sitting on top of a label?
They're not labelled, no, not generally not. So what I've got is, I'll show you in a minute anyway. This is a plastic stand behind it that is actually my label for that particular specimen. The one underneath it, in case of those ones, I think that's the original label that came with the specimen. So it's just been left there and hasn't been sorted. A bit lazy, I suppose.
You've
Then,
got a number on the specimen, presumably.
no, I don't. Very naughty. Very naughty.
You are not afraid of earthquakes.
Right.
Well, we did have one. We
Yeah.
did have one, and the only thing
Yeah.
in here, I've got a couple of they're sort of I know this probably sounds a bit odd, special coffee cups, takeaway coffee cups. So one's got crystals on it, and the other one's got Tassie tiger and some other animals on it that have not been used. And I've got those sitting up on top of one of the sets of drawers there. And the earthquake that we had a few months ago, they fell off. I'm actually more concerned about lighting. So in the IKEA cabinet, what I had was a couple of bar LED strips about that long, but fairly chunky pieces, and adhesive. So I've got double-sided tape on them, and I had one on the top that decided to fall off and landed on top of the minerals. It damaged one specimen. I've got a calcite from Dome Rock, not Dome Rock. What's it called? It's Queensland locality. Red Dome, the Red Dome mine, and it is quite a nice crystal, about, I don't know, close to 2 centimeters across, and it is no longer on the matrix. That's the damage that happened. Nothing else got affected, just that one. But it's something that I tend not to have in there now is lighting. So I use a torch if I need to look into it and then it's dark. These are the other drawers that I've got. I've got on my right hand side here, I've got some fairly industrial, as you can see, shelving system, which holds my library, my books, of which I have a number of. My wife is actually quite worried that this end of the house will actually start to sink at some stage. And it might be why the earthquake didn't do too much damage, because I've got so much weight in here. But in between those two run from the side walls inwards, and in the middle I had just enough room to put these sets of drawers. Now there's 3 sets there of 10 drawers each, and I got those from our local office supplies, Officeworks here in Australia. They doesn't look like they actually stock them anymore, which is really sad. They've got a new style which only has 5 drawers, but apparently from what I've heard, you can't actually pull the drawers right out, so you can't get to the back 5 or 6 centimeters, which is a bit stupid. Whereas these ones I can take all the way out. And
I have drawers like that. There's a set of 5, and I think you can pull them all the way out.
Yeah,
but
these
they're
ones
really
you can.
expensive.
Yeah,
Like
these
$100
ones,
for just the 5.
no, these ones, when I got them, they were priced really well. So they were less than $50 Australian for each set of 10.
IKEA, I think, are doing drawers that are very similar to that. I looked at last time we went there, I just didn't buy them, but they're still about $100.
Yeah. Well, they're all metal as well, so not going to be cheap. They do come with trolley wheels as well if you want to have them as a standalone. They're originally intended for stationary next to desks, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of 10 and 2 sets of 5, I think. And I actually do have some of my art supplies in one of them as well. That's tucked away inside the wardrobe along with all the flats. But very useful again for anything from well, thumbnails certainly, and miniature to small cabinet, I suppose, specimens. And then I've got a few of odds and sods. So you can see one on the left there as well. These are small little cabinets that came with collections of micros from friends of mine that I acquired. These particular ones with these little yellow labels on were from Joe Price in Melbourne. Joe was moving out of her house into not care, but into an area where she didn't have room for a lot of minerals. So she kept a few, but I ended up with the vast majority of her micros. And I'm still in the process at the moment of actually sorting through that. So, you know, it's going to take a long while, but I'm keeping the drawers because they're really quite a good size. I'll show you the size of those boxes in a minute. Then I've got another set here. This set of drawers is probably about 1.5 meters maybe in height, maybe not quite that. And it is, in fact, you can see, actually, yeah, that's it over there in the background, over my left shoulder. They're really good depth for the thumbnail size boxes that we tend to use here, which are not perkies. They're a bit taller than perkies. And you know, there's 14 drawers, I think. It's quite a good cabinet to have. Anyway, I'll just stop sharing that for a minute, and I'll just show you a couple of things. So that's the thumbnail size box that we tend to use a lot, which is really good size. It's got a table that's old crappy blue tack that got stuck in there a long time ago. It won't come off. It's got a table in there. You can also take that out, and so you get a bit more height if you want to. And then my micro boxes, this size, which again are a little bit higher than some of the other ones you see, and quite a solid plastic. They're not flimsy. So if I take the lid off, you can see there that there's hardly any flex in it, which means that they're not going to break. I know some of the European ones tend to break it if you do a bit of damage on it. And they're a good size for a handwritten label, which is what I've got on there. And of course, my number on the bottom, just in case a Rod Martin happens and I lose lids and bases and they get separated. And because I put the mineral actually in the base, it keeps everything nicely together. So, and then the last thing I was going to show from my perspective is in the cabinet you saw little labels like this. So they're handwritten ones, and oops, going the right way. And that's the plastic, which was just an eBay purchase. I originally saw them in a friend's collection up in Broken Hill, and was able to get myself a few as well. And all that you do there is slide the label in, and where I've got the label from is I had some business cards printed up with basically 4 labels on it, and then I just cut that into 4, handwrite it, and slide one of them into that plastic when I think about it. So yes. Cool. The other thing that
I may have stolen that idea from somebody, just somebody random.
Well, I did too. So, well, no, I didn't actually. Thought that one up myself. The other thing that I have is not all specimens stand by themselves, as you'd know. So some of the ones, depending on what it is, some of the ones actually use something like this, which again was just an eBay purchase, solid plastic or acrylic, and you can always stick a little bit of blue tack or something just on the bottom bits there if you need to give it a bit more stability. But that's me and storage and presentation.
Very good.
So do we want to
have you got anything on your system which tells you which drawer or tray they're in?
Not so much the drawers, because the micros, if I'm looking for number 342, there's a good chance it's in that top drawer behind me, unless it's in a slightly larger specimen, and then I've got to hunt for it. If it's in one of these thumbnail boxes, it could be in a flat, or it could be in the set of drawers over in that corner.
But I've got an entry in my catalogue for the location. I think that's,
I do too, but I didn't put it in there until quite late on, which means I'm still in catch-up mode a bit.
I've just started by going a bit further than that. My friend has just started re-cataloguing his stuff again, and he decided to put this on the top of his box. So I do the same now. And I actually put on the cabinet number, the drawer number, and the position in the drawer on the label on all my Micromount boxes, and anything now which is going out anywhere. So I've got a list. Can I take the floor for a minute? So
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, please.
I'm not prepared anything, but where is it? I think it might be this one. Yeah, that's. Can you see that?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That's just a list of the cabinets that are in my collection and where they are in relation to where I am. So, and you can see there's 15. Well, there's 22 cabinets containing somewhere in the region of 400 trays.
Oh my God.
These 400 numbers are actually in brown rectangular boxes that we carry minerals around in, because I've got nowhere else to put the bigger pieces, so they go in there now. This represents all various sizes, and I've got another chart somewhere which tells me what's actually in those drawers.
I missed the house of the neighbors.
Yeah, I've just before lockdown started, I actually went through a process of putting a new label on every specimen in every box, and that's just over 17,000 labels I had to do.
Oh, good Lord.
All the ones in these boxes, all these bigger specimens, have all got laminated labels inside, because I had to buy a new printer at the start of lockdown, which I couldn't put cardboard through, or sheets of card through, so I had to put ordinary paper through and then make it stiff enough to go in the boxes. So I actually laminated the whole lot of them. So I've got probably about 5,000 specimens that have been laminated labels in.
Jeez.
That's I mean, I haven't prepared nothing else. That's basically that's mine. So that tells me what cabinet. All these are micro ones. The first few ones are micro ones.
Are they all numbered according to when you got them sequentially, or?
My collection is numbered sequentially from. Well, I actually started again with the labeling in about 1981 when I moved house. I had to move everything from a flat to the house I'd got. So I had another cabinet built, and all the stuff I started from number one again. But I've got a list for all the stuff I've ever collected, and it's all catalogued. Now I've even taken Steve's mantra now, and I've actually made my access data file into an Excel spreadsheet, and I found a way of getting photographs into it, which is
excellent.
Nice.
very good. Yeah, but yeah, I can find a specimen reasonably quickly.
Oh, John.
Yeah, sure. I
I
hope
No, you can't.
all of us have some.
But he has got nothing labelled at all. But every specimen's got a in his boxes has got a location and what it is on, or what he thinks it is on the box. But there's nothing further than that, is it, Dick?
No, but I can, if somebody asks me where is so and so, I can go to the drawer and get it out.
Get it, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot more cabinets than I have, but they're all different cabinets. I got, but we have the metal ones. We call them Bisley cabinets over here, because that's what the make of them. And,
I'm just going to try and bring them up in a minute. So
we just bring. I mean, there's a company called Ryman's over here, which is sells. They did sell metal cabinets, 15 drawer, 10 drawer, and we just sort of we're cleaning them up in the old days. And then old print trays used to turn up, and we'd use those. But it's basically anything we can put put minerals into, basically.
Let's do coffee.
I even got a couple of cabinets from when I was working at the castle. They were dumping some stuff away in the museum, and they said, "Do you want a couple of old cabinets?" So I got a nice mahogany one and a couple of yeah.
The ROM was getting rid of all of its beautiful old cabinets
Yeah.
from its workroom last year, and I know quite a few people picked them up, but they're so dang heavy. I mean,
Yeah.
these old cabinets from 100 years ago have a phenomenal weight to them.
Oh, yeah.
I was lucky to pick up metal 3-drawer wide metal cabinets that were tossed by our Ontario Provincial Police. So I got hold of 2 of those and cleaned them up, and they're just absolutely fantastic. There's that old sturdy steel. And I don't know why they didn't sell them, but they didn't.
I got my best cabinets from Radio Shack when they went out of business. And you know, the cabinets, they had all the resistors in.
Yeah.
And I managed to get 4, so 28 drawers of really heavy metal, strong metal cabinets with ball bearings and all that in the drawers
Oh,
for
beautiful.
$100. But they did weigh a ton.
Should I think I'll share my screen for a second.
Those cabinets
all right,
over here
Lee.
now, the really good wooden ones are £1,000 plus.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
God.
when my dad was a preparative chemist at Monash University, and the department in their wisdom got rid of all their preparative chemists and got rid of their storage of their chemists. So I managed to get a full set of compactor shelves, which is quite nice.
Yes.
So you've done pretty well to do that.
Yeah, and the last set, these 3 from here, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
From this one through to there, that's all minerals. The rest of it's tools and, you know, random chemistry supplies from somewhere. But I also got some map drawers, which are very useful.
Yeah.
So these are sometimes called survey drawers, sometimes called map drawers, but they're all metal. There's 6 full width, full depth map drawers in each one. I got 2 of them. I don't think I've got a picture of the cabinets that were there. No, I don't think I do. But I also got a whole bunch of, you can see the edge of the cabinets here. These were chemistry drawers for keeping chemistry samples and glassware in, that the department also threw out.
Nicely dovetailed.
Yeah.
Those map drawers are phenomenally expensive if you try to buy them.
How do you ever find anything in those things?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, if you want a specimen, how the hell do you find it in one of them?
Well, each drawer is labeled, and I have a catalogue with the drawer label. Let me just show you my catalogue. Just change screens.
And I thought I had a lot of specimens. Boy, when I'm looking at you,
How many, Liz?
How many have I got?
Yeah.
At the moment? Oh, I have no idea anymore. I'm doing Mont Saint-Hilaire. And you know what that means? Every single specimen that I got is a big chunk, has now multiplied.
Yeah.
So I don't know, a few thousand. I don't know.
Right. So I've been cataloging the whole impetus for me getting on this group and a whole bunch of other stuff was I realized that I needed to catalog my collection because I went looking for something and I couldn't find it. So this is the catalog I've been constructing. I've got obviously the critical information is the location. I've got the MinDat ID. If I put it on MinDat, I've got my specimen ID, which is just sequential on when I catalogued it. It's not a special number or anything. I put the MinDat location in if it's available. And I have the location of where it's stored. So I have the drawer number. And what type of box it's in. Is it in a Perspex box? Is it in a cardboard box? Is it in a egg carton? Is it unwrapped? If it's big, it'll be unwrapped and just in a protective location. What is that? Loose. I don't know what that means. Probably means I need to go back and fix it up.
Or it's a typo
Dropped
and
it.
you've actually lost it.
Lost. Yeah. Then I've got the
Yeah.
dimensions, and that automatically tells, I mean, I've got a formula which tells me if it is a small, medium, or large, basically. And that's just on the aggregate of the average dimensions. Photos, some information about how I got it, if I can remember what price it was, and then some notes. And that's the basis of my catalog at the moment. I have to
At least
admit,
you've got a catalogue.
I'm relying on photography to help cross-reference which specimens belong to which specimen number. For some reason, I'm very reluctant to mark the minerals with an ID. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's probably
a lot of
because it
work.
feels like vandalism is
Yeah, that's-
really what it comes down to.
I agree. I
Yeah.
I never do that. No.
I haven't wanted to, but when I took my specimens for a case in Tucson, I did, because I wanted, I didn't want things moving around and they look alike and they're all that, but I also try to, one of the things that causes my cataloging to be slow is that I want a photograph of everything. And that, since I'm a photographer, that means I try to take a good one, which means it takes too long. So everything is very slow.
So
but I have marked some of them, and for me, it's more trouble because I collect fluorescent, so I don't want the marking to then
Right.
glow.
So do you want your markings to fluoresce, or do you
I
want
don't.
them to not fluoresce?
I want them not to fluoresce, and so
Yeah.
I think I found a particular kind of whiteout, and then nail polish on top of it, and very 0.05 pens that work. And then you get to the problem of, oh darn it, the nail polish dissolves the ink, so you have to be careful not everything dry. It is annoying.
I was considering something like micro dot and QR code type little tiny little bits of paper with the QR code on them. No. Just no. Any technical
rock that was done by somebody who worked in the Smithsonian, and it's just got a big number taped on it, and I'm like, that's just all they cared about,
I mean, it's important, but it is also at the same time a bit of a archival and longevity nightmare.
Right. If you had if you had a crystal that was a floater and it was completely translucent all around, I probably would never try to even do it, because it would really be defacing it. But some rocks just have a side that's nothing, and I'll do it then.
Actually, one of the little rules I've got is whenever I acquire a specimen, the first thing I do is look on the bottom, because the number of things I've found that are interesting on the bottom of crystals, on the bottom of specimens, man, there's some good stuff there that people haven't even noticed.
I have one specimen that I looked on the bottom, and I could tell that it was it had belonged to George Kunz at one point. It wasn't in his collection, but he had sold it, and you could see that it had been in his sales. And I could then find on Mindat a letter that showed that somebody had sent him a pound of this stuff at one point in the 1890s or something like that for him to sell. And so I just, it was more interesting that way. But yeah.
Yeah, so you've got two things. The aspect that Paul's talking about is finding unusual species or crystals or whatever on the base, whereas you've got the historical side. I think they're both very important.
Yeah.
The only other thing I might do is there's a particular kind of tape that is really for wounds. It's this white sort of fabric stuff that seems to go on. It doesn't seem to dry out, and it doesn't seem to fall off, and a lot of them don't seem to fluoresce. So when I'm in a hurry and I don't want to deface something permanently, I may stick a label with that on.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah, I do know there's one, there's probably more than one, but one that I know of uses small round numbers. So I don't know whether it's a printed thing or whatever, it doesn't matter, and actually attaches it using a bit of mineral tack. So
Yeah.
it's very, very temporary and you can take it off
Yes.
whenever.
Yeah,
That-
all my larger specimens that are not in plastic boxes now are being labelled up with a bit of mineral tack and a piece of and a label on the back end somewhere where no one can see it, so
So it's
they
at
can be
least-
matched up with the
There's at least 2 people doing that then, which is good.
yeah.
But one of the issues of writing a number on in the way that Doug, you were explaining is if you've got material that's friable or just very uneven, it's very difficult to actually do it. If you've got a flat surface, it's a lot easier. But
Yeah, and I worry about the longevity of glues as well and adhesives. Those things don't tend to last. I mean, in human lifetime spans, like 10, 15 years. But I would be hesitant to guarantee their stickiness after 15 years.
No, of course not.
I think if they're left in there where they're supposed to be left, the minerals, they do tend to stick on fairly well. I mean, I got stuff that has been on there now nearly 50 years, and yeah, some of them do fall off, but by and large, the numbers on there, it may have faded a bit, but I can. But the relabeling that I've done is sort of more or less sorted all that out. It's all work in progress anyway.
On the
There's,
other side, I
double-
tried to get rid of that whiteout one, Seth, because I'd made a mistake, and I learned, oh, I don't make a mistake because it was really
Well,
a pain to get off.
I bought one of those pens very early on, and I painted nail varnish on, and when I went to use the pen, it just clogged the pen up and it wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a waste of time and money.
And the trouble with the nail polish is they've altered the formula so much that it's no longer as durable as it used to be. I discovered that. Perhaps I bought the wrong brand, but I discovered that to my dismay because I have used that in the past to cover little paper labels that
Yeah.
I've made using indelible ink, and it really is indelible. And it hasn't come off, but the surface is not as good. And I suspect it's not going to wear very well because some of it's already started yellowing.
Yeah.
I was going to mention though, for attaching labels to a flat surface, especially if it's fairly smooth, there is a Scotch brand double-sided tape that's actually used as an archival tape.
That's what you want.
It's the top quality that they have, and it really is good, and it doesn't yellow. You mentioned 50 years. I've been using it now for about 30 years on minerals, but before that, I used it on paper things, and they are all staying very, very well. And I figure
Nice.
that's about as long as you can expect things to last. So
Keep
it's
in mind though that
very good.
archival has a different meaning, and archival generally means it's removable. So which is good as long as it doesn't remove by itself.
Yeah, it stays when you want it and
Not
then
in this
removes when you
case,
want it.
not in this case. This actually is meant, this was archival in that it wouldn't yellow, it wouldn't dry. That was how it was being used.
That's what I.
And it specifies those were its characteristics.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. It's a clear tape. It's not a translucent tape. So it's something to keep in mind. I've been using it to attach my thumbnail labels, things like that, when I want to really fix them. And I've actually used it when I make these little foam bases for my specimens in boxes, the plastic boxes. And I have been holding them down instead of using the tack, which can release greases. I've been holding them down with this. And you know how heavy barite or celestine is. I can turn my specimen upside down and that foam will not pull off. So that's pretty strong.
That's pretty good.
And I'm talking about a 3x3 box for this. So it's not just a little thumbnail box. I figure that's pretty good.
So you're talking about nail polish. You just reminded me of a habit I got into with the some of the really tiny cavities, like for ulrikite, for Lake Boga specimens. You may have a specimen that's like 5 centimeters across and it's got one tiny little dot on it. So I was cutting out little tiny slender triangles of paper, maybe a few millimeters long, pointing them at where the cavity is and then gluing them in with airplane glue, which is a solvated solution of polycarbonate, and that should last quite a while, and it sticks very nicely. And as long as you're very careful about how much you apply when you daub it on, it doesn't spread very far and stays quite local to the piece of paper, and has the advantage of soaking through the paper and preserving the paper as well.
How long have you been using this?
About 5 years. So I don't know what it's going to be like long term, but it seems to be working for now.
I'm still storing models that my kids made until they're ready to take them.
Yes.
And they're holding up really well.
Yes.
And they're not yellowing.
I'm not worried about it yellowing because I'm literally putting a visual marker on the rock. One of the reasons I chose airplane adhesive as opposed to another glue is I know that it's a solvent-based plastic, and then I can and the solvent is acetone, so it's easy to take off. All you do is you put the rock in acetone, and as long as none of the minerals on the rock are soluble in acetone, which I suspect is very unlikely, you can remove the label and all signs of the plastic.
I've got some stuff that I labeled with airplane glue back in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's all turned yellow. So
That wouldn't surprise me.
I'm now printing with a laser printer 4 or 6 point numbers and using white school glue because it'll come off in water if anybody wants to take things off.
PVA and its friends. Yeah.
So how does, or has anyone tried recently labeling other than the old-fashioned way of painting on, the white base and then the number, specimens that are more friable? Because I've noticed that, older things that I've bought, usually the numbering, even the white based stuff, is just barely holding on to the mineral anymore.
Yeah.
So how does one deal with that except making sure it's in a self-contained box?
Good question.
Didn't you soak them in PVA?
You put it on a pedestal.
Yeah. Embedded in resin.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think there's an
one that
easy
you can
answer
do
to
that
that.
way.
Well, you can stabilize the Gaussian brown matrices with half white glue and half water, and it will actually stabilize that stuff so it doesn't fry up and it doesn't come off in your hand, and so therefore the labels will stick to it when you use other, like what I use is more white glue, just straight white glue for that, putting the label on.
Yeah. I guess the thing we're not even talking about is the different climates we live in too, which affect how all these things are going to hold up over time. Humidity and heat, temperature changes and all the rest of it.
And if
you only get about a week of humidity a year, so it's not really that big a problem. The rain that comes most of the year is another problem, but
actually one of the, sorry Steve, go.
I was going to say, if you live in Melbourne like Paul does, you get 4 seasons in one day anyway.
We've had that collected in Cornwall, 4 seasons in a day. Good grief.
How do you handle self-collected specimens that you have a whole bin of stuff that you collected one day, and yet you haven't mounted, you haven't picked it out? Do you label the bin? What do you do with all that stuff?
Have you seen my compactors?
Yeah, we all have a garage full.
Yeah.
boxes and buckets, and they're all.
If you just label the
paper,
box and you don't actually
sure, of
consider
course.
each catalog. Yeah.
Because
Right,
you have
that's
to clean it,
Yeah.
you have to clean it, you have to format it, you have to examine it all, and then ultimately you put it in a box and you give it a label.
Yeah.
But before that, you just label the bucket where it's in.
So as you saw with the compactus, I have a lot of mango and avocado boxes in there. And initially each one would have been from one location where I collected. And in the process of selecting the best ones, I will have taken them out, put them in their own box, labeled them,
Of course.
put them in
Naturally.
a drawer somewhere. And now that I'm cataloging, I'm going through systematically, picking a box, cherry picking the best pieces that I want to keep for the ones that are worthy of photographing or are interesting, and then separating them out. And I'm now at the point where I've got a lot of half boxes that I've then bundled together or have been shifted around. So now I'm going through boxes of mixed specimens, and it's really getting challenging with some of the specimens to remember where they came from. So yes,
I've got a
I
similar
couldn't stand
system,
that.
but all the stuff that I've collected over all the years that I've been collecting, I would go through it once, break it all up, pull out the very best of what I see when I go through that, maybe get, I don't know, 4 or 5 specimens of each species out of it, but I'll then rebag and wrap up in toilet tissue every specimen and put it back in a bag for future reference for when I got old. And I'm now getting there now, and I've now started going back through it again. And it's working very well. I found a cracking little specimen yesterday out of this
Started
stuff.
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Find the picture.
How much storage did you need?
Yeah.
I've got a double garage.
Oh, man.
a full
It's a bit
barrel.
like a pirate's treasure
Yeah,
trove,
right.
and there's bags all over the place.
You got cabinets all over the place too.
Yeah, Martin, I still haven't worked out what I want to be when I grow up yet. So
Yeah,
No,
that's
no,
right.
no.
all relative.
A pirate, obviously. All right, so shall I have a bit of a discussion about 3D printing and display stands and things
Yes.
like that? So this is
my
a
goodness.
specimen of
Oh, please.
calcite on skolzite from India. And it's a rather awkward shape to display, and it's very, very delicate. So I decided it needed protecting and it needed its own stand.
I put cheese in those things.
Yes.
You
Now-
got the right priorities.
You know what? You're right. I'm going to disassemble this and put cheese in it.
If you turn it upside down, there's snow.
If I shake it,
Yes.
yes.
So you design a 3D stand for each
I-
specimen and print it
No,
out?
no, it's all on the basis of what does it need. So one of the things about 3D printing is, mineral collecting is a dangerous hobby because it can lead to so many other hobbies. And 3D printing is the same. It leads to electronics, it leads to materials science and engineering, it leads to lots and lots of tinkering, it leads to 3D modeling, and it's intense. It is a full-time occupation in its own right, from the design right through, but it's a lot of fun. I have to say, it's a lot of fun.
I don't get it.
The best use of 3D printing is not to replicate entire things, but to replicate the small fiddly details that you can't do easily unless you've got a lathe or a CNC mill or something like that. And then, so my attitude is it is one tool in a suite of tools that I have available to make something. So I'm in the process of trying to get a stacking rail built, and I want to isolate it from vibrations. So I'm going to use, as much as possible, I'm going to use plywood and sheet aluminium and aluminium rails that I can buy, T-nuts and things that hold down. So anything that I want it stiff, I'm not going to bother 3D printing. One of the things about 3D printing is the smaller the object, the easier it is to get a good quality part. When you start getting large objects at the size of your build tray, which is typically 20 to 30 centimeters square, thermal expansion and contraction gets in your way and parts start to warp. The dimensional stability becomes a lot more difficult as you get larger and larger parts. So design small and design for attachability. I'll just start up Fusion 360, which is the tool of choice that I have been using. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have, like I said, I have a, I'll just do a quick demo. I have a thing that I want to build, which is an isolation plate to mount my camera on and image stacking rig on. So it's going to be about a 30 centimeter round plate of plywood, and I want to mount feet on it that help limit the vibration. So what I've got in mind is an attachment disc with a captured bolt, and then I'll have a piece of threaded rod that's honed to a point with a fairly sharp radius as a foot. So if I start with a start with a circle. So I want to make it 5 centimeters in diameter. That's nice and big. Then I'll put in another circle in the middle. I'll put a hexagon in the middle for the captured bolt. Now, I don't actually know off the top of my head how big the bolt is going to be, but let's say it's 10 mil. Then I'm going to need some circles for the holes. So let's put 3 holes in at 3 mil. I don't need the screws to be very big. I can then make a number of them now. Is that, yeah. Select the pattern, select the object, select the center. I now have 3 holes equidistant around it. So this is the design layout. It's called a sketch. So now I have an object that I can start to manipulate. So let's start by making a disc, let's call it centimeter thick. Of course, the body is now hiding all the bits that I want to manipulate, and it's decided to hide the sketch as well. Very helpful of it. Now I need to capture the bolt, so I'm going to go 5 millimeters down, halfway through the thing. And these holes need to go through. No, that's not what I wanted. No, it's not going to let me. Let me do it the other way. No.
For the ship.
It's always the same when you're trying to do something. It always
Yeah,
goes.
it's all right. I can't. I'll just do one. You'll get the idea. So now we have a hole. So now I can see the body. So we have a schmozzle. What happened to my hexagonal hole? It's decided not to do it. Let's do it now then. All right. Again, this one, I can chamfer that hole. Why is it doing that? Let's have a look.
Does it make it solid, or does it actually try to reduce the amount of material?
So at this point, it's all in virtual. This is just a 3D modeling tool. Why won't it let me select that? Not going to let me do it. Anyway, I should be able to select this object and make a chamfer with it, but something's gone wrong. I don't know what. We'll work it out. But you get the idea. You can model in 3D to make an object. The next step, let's assume that that's finished, is that we want to send it to the 3D printer. Now, I'm not actually going to send it to the 3D printer here because I don't have Cura installed on this machine yet. But you've got all these options for how you want it, where you want to send it, and how it's how high resolution you want to do. Well, actually, let's try. Let's see what it says. I have to select the object. Probably going to complain that I don't have Cura installed. Yeah, no, it's just gone and done nothing. All right. So when you've now got a 3D object on your computer. I'll stop sharing because I don't see that anymore. The next step is that you need to prepare it for the 3D printer. Now, CNC machines and a lot of automated machines have their own language called G code, which is literally a list of instructions for how to behave. Move this so many millimeters this way, or so many steps this way, up, down, to change the temperature, all that sort of stuff. So you need to translate this 3D object into code that the 3D printer can understand and action. And that's done by what's called a slicing tool. There's a whole bunch of them, open source, closed source. Some of them better than others, some are worse than others, some are commercial, some are required to be used with certain printers because the manufacturers are stupid and decide that they're going to try and lock you in. But basically what that does is it looks at the 3D object you've got and translates it into layers that are the dimensions that for each layer that the 3D printer is set up to print. Like the printer that I have access to can do layers that are anything from 0.1 millimeters to a little over 1 millimeter thick. Now, you never want to go to those extremes, so I generally do 0.4 millimeters or so. So each layer is 0.4 millimeters. So it basically takes that 3D model and slices it into layers. You can, I don't know if you can see the layers in this one. Let me just assemble it. Is there enough resolution to see that that is got layers in it, lines on it, on the horizontal lines?
You can do your speaker
on my screen anyway.
Unless we make it big.
All right.
I'm gonna get out of here.
Anyway, one of the finishing touches I need to do is this is quite rough because it's made up of layers that overlap slightly, so I need to take some sandpaper to it. There's a whole bunch of considerations when you 3D print that feed back into the design steps. For instance, anything that overhangs more than a certain angle is going to need something underneath it to support it. Otherwise, you won't get dimensional stability in that upright member. So there's a whole bunch of strategies for printing supports that are use minimal material, are actually strong enough to hold things up, and easy to remove. If you can print in a way that eliminates supports, you're much better off than using supports, including, I've just seen a video about somebody who, one of the things you can do with 3D printing is you can pause the print, do some action, and then continue printing again, because it knows exactly where it left off. So that means you can do things like put a cavity in, to hold a nut, put the nut in, and then continue printing. So that nut is now completely captured within the part and things like that. So there are strategies for minimizing the amount of support you need to use, and the complexity of more complex parts can be built in a way that is both easy to build, easy to clean up. I'll put a link to the video on Messenger later on. Yeah, and the actual 3D printing part takes several hours. I think the shortest print I've ever done took about an hour, and the longest print I did took about 4 days. Obviously, the longer it takes, the more risk there is of something going wrong, and usually it goes wrong at hour 36, at which point you have to start again. So also that's an incentive to try and design small parts that you can assemble together into a larger thing. So yeah, as you can see, it's a little involved. It's not cheap in the sense that if you had a mass-produced part, you would get it for a much lower price. But I couldn't afford to design this if I didn't have access to a 3D printer, because the amount of work to make that as an injection molded part, I'd have to sell 500,000 of them, and it's just not viable. And you're talking $100,000 worth of tooling before you've even started producing any parts. So yeah. So yes, if you're looking for a new hobby, I can highly recommend 3D printing.
No.
Oh,
Oh,
you-
fascinating, but no.
Yeah. Yeah. There are ways around that problem though. There's websites like Thingiverse, which is where people put their models, their 3D models ready for printing up for other people to use and modify. So I've used Thingiverse a lot. Particularly early on, I used Thingiverse to make a Canon mount for my microscope so that I could take photographs down my microscope. Worked really well. Nice and secure, dimensionally stable, did the job very nicely. Took a little bit of tweaking because it turns out that 1 1/4 inch microscope tubes between models are not all the same. Who knew? So yes, I printed it out. It was dimensionally accurate. Didn't fit. So I had to tweak the design to match the microscope. So when 3D printing's been around since the early 90s, I guess. But for the majority of that time, it's been a commercial activity. So a machine would cost $50,000 in $1990. Now, the printer we got cost just over $300 US, and is capable of printing anything up to about a foot in long dimension. Quite reliable, printed out of the box first time. Of course, we've since purchased lots of upgrades, so it's probably cost about $1,000 by now.
How much do the raw materials cost?
The cheapest I have seen PLA, which is the most common and cheapest material, is about $12 a kilo, but $20 to $100 a kilo is not uncommon. And you can expect once you've tweaked everything in and you've fine-tuned it, you can expect about an 80% success rate. And you're probably looking at about 10 to 20% wastage in terms of support material, depending on how you go about how good you get at designing things to not need support.
So question, Paul,
Yep.
how many stands, how many mineral related stands have you actually printed?
And they're all going to be one-offs.
Yeah.
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 I've bought some stands sold by one of the companies that also makes UV lights. And the
Yep.
whole point of the stand was that it was printed in a plastic that did not fluoresce.
Nice.
Sadly, that may be true the first day it was out there, but over time they start to fluoresce.
Okay.
Right. One of the things you can do, you don't have to just stick with the 3D printed object. One of the things that you can do with 3D printing is instead of 3D printing the object, you can 3D print the mold and then cast into it. Or you can do what's called, you're familiar with the lost wax technique?
Mhm.
So not only can you buy resins that are essentially waxes that you can then melt out, like for use with lost wax, you can just burn the PLA out or the plastic out. And that works really well. It's stinky, but it works. And I've seen people do very thin-skinned PLA 3D printing with very little in the way of internal support. Directly put that into casting sand and just pour the molten metal straight in and burn the plastic up using the heat of the molten metal, called lost PLA technique. Or yeah, lost 3D printed technique. And that works really well. So you can, if I wanted to replicate this in aluminium, I could.
Oh,
It's worth stating though that I didn't buy a 3D printer in order to print this mineral stand. I printed this mineral stand because I already had a 3D printer. Sorry, Jim, you were saying?
yeah, I was gonna ask you if, what about using a hand scanner to scan the bottom of your specimen? And then use that as a negative mold and just make a stand that would fit just the bottom of the specimen.
You can certainly do that. The resolution, what 3D scanning is almost an art in and of itself. You can certainly scan objects in 3D, and photogrammetry also works in the same respect. The difficulty becomes that if you have anything that allows interlocking, you've got to make those things go away before you start. Otherwise, you can't literally get the mineral in there. And you risk, I didn't want this to be held on too tightly because it's so delicate. Anything that I had to sort of wriggle in was going to cause damage. Let me just show you the photos I took in order to set this, to get the dimensions. So this is a photograph of the specimen next to a ruler in the orientation that allowed me to measure the sort of length that I was going to need to support it. So I figured I needed to support it from about here down to the tip. So I took a series of photographs. The width was important to get the dimensions. Right, so you get that idea.
You can't do like that. Those acrylic stands that exactly match. That's
you can, but I don't think that it's valuable, if that makes sense. So one of the things you can do in Fusion 360 is you can import an image, and then you can do some measurement on it. So for instance, why won't it let me? So I can say, I know it's going to, I'm going to want it to come about there, and then I'm going to want it to come about there. So, oops, extra line. What I can do is I can measure that angle, which is about 56 degrees. Now, once I started modeling, I thought, well, 60 degrees is close enough. It's a little bit wider. It's not going to pinch. I'm intending to use mineral tack to pad it anyway. So yeah, you can import, you can use direct measurements off your photos. You can also scale this. This is not to scale at the moment, but I could say scale and say tell Fusion 360 that this length here is 50 millimeters, and it would then adjust the size of the image to match. So there's a lot you can do with that. I'm actually, in this case, I wanted to keep it fairly loose. If I was going to do a very tight fit, I'm not sure how I'd go about that. I'd probably go to a different technique than 3D printing, such as wrapping the specimen with a very thin layer of plastic or resin, and then casting it in a resin that sets, but that would be pretty permanent. You can certainly scan and then get rid of all the asperities and make it a much smoother thing, and then 3D print that, so and make sure that it has nothing to lock it in place, as it were. And there are people who, I believe, offer that as a service for high-end specimens. Yeah. So yeah, this was a very special little specimen that I wanted to be able to display properly. So
Very
quite
good.
well.
Very
good. Thank you, Paul.
Pleasure.
All right, we're 7:15. We've been going a while. Is there anybody else that wanted to add something to the discussion?
Well, can I do a really low tech?
Sorry.
This is really low tech. Somebody, are you interested?
Yep, go for it, Liz.
It's very quick. There it is. Can anybody, everybody in North America should recognize these?
It's a pizza
Yes.
spacer thing.
It's a pizza table. And then you trim down the ends.
Yeah.
As many as you want, whatever size you want. It's absolutely wonderful for miniatures. And whenever I've taken these to the shows and put them up, everybody's thrilled because they all say, oh, I always throw those out. What a brilliant idea. So we're recycling plastic.
That's good. I don't eat pizza.
That's the last of mine.
You've inspired me. I'm having pizza for breakfast this morning.
Oh, yuck.
Actually, these are all very old because I don't buy pizza much anymore.
I don't know about what plastic yours are made of, but the ones that we have in Australia are made out of polyethylene because it's one of the cheapest plastics around, which is good because it lasts quite well.
I have another cheap solution. I took this to Tucson for my rocks. It's a pool noodle, or it's a pipe insulation. And I would just cut it, and then you could use a razor blade to carve it to exactly match the bottom. And again, fluorescent, so it didn't matter it was dark because it doesn't fluoresce, and it's sitting in the dark and it makes the specimen look like it was floating. But you know, I think you can get much thinner than this too, and it was just some way of holding the things.
Excellent. Gerhard, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I also have something for you. I'm collecting minerals since nearly 50 years ago, starting collecting micromounts in 77. And now I handle about 15,000 micromounts and 10,000 bigger pieces. I'll show you something from my collection. So try.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There we go.
Yay.
Here it is.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, fine. This is part of my collection. The drawers are self-made
Wow.
in a very old way. Very simple, very cheap. So for a large collection like mine, it's okay. I know it's not beautiful,
No,
but
that's
it works.
beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mhm.
Works well.
Very good.
Yep, I hope so.
One of the dealers in Melbourne had a series of 3 high or 4 high trays of plywood mounted on sliding rails for like the kitchen drawers, which worked really well. And I've been contemplating something like that for my compactus because, believe it or not, I'm actually running out of space. Yeah.
My only problem with that arrangement is the dust that gathers on the boxes.
Yeah.
I've got
Shed,
I've got a few of those types of cabinet kicking around, and the dust is just half an inch thick on some of them when you go after 10 years of not pulling the tray out.
so there's a
Then just-
solution to that, which is really easy. Start collecting dust.
Yes, yes.
This
I use
drawers,
magnet strips and drape
Yeah.
and then fasten at the bottom with magnet strips. A clear plastic or even opaque plastic sheet to keep the dust out.
Old bed sheets work too.
Up to a point, yeah.
I should mention that these drawers are inside another furniture.
Yep.
And protected from dust. No
Oh.
dust inside.
That's good.
Oh, they're inside a cabinet.
Ah,
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah,
Okay.
no,
Inside of a cupboard.
Covered.
Oh,
And paper boxes
Mhm.
yeah. I use them also all the time. Yeah.
are showcases.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness.
And you see all in showcases are labeled.
Nice.
wow.
Yep, part of my collection. And
Yeah.
now I'll show you something, other things. For the Micromount. I hope you can see it.
Mhm.
Yeah, boxes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is my
Okay.
typical Micromount. The label is inside the box, and inside the box it cannot fall off. It is always clean. The label holds the mineral, the location, and the number is the Strunz systematic. For larger pieces, you will laugh about it. For larger pieces, I write with a typewriter.
Oh, yeah.
Very
This is
simple.
what I have inside the showcases.
Cool.
For more important things, I used to have the printer.
Yep.
Guys, I'm sorry, but I have to go. I'll see you next time. Okay.
All right,
See you,
Hank,
Hank.
thanks.
Bye bye.
Hank.
Bye bye.
And for the sorry, I'm looking for the right word. For the catalog, you will laugh about it. I used the typewriter too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, it works, still works. since 45 years ago. On the first page, I have the information about the mineral. On the second page, I have the information about the localities. And for me, it is for a very large collection. It is simple to handle, very cheap and easy.
It's excellent.
Very good.
That's it.
Thank you.
I don't
Okay.
know if you can see these at all. They were done today.
Yep.
So
Oh, that's probably me, guys.
All the examples in this video are
Sorry.
all around FDM 3D
on the
printing.
base, they get that.
Got it.
label on the-
Utilize real thermoplastic resins.
I'm glad that was useful then. I'm trying to find the video series in the background for how to use Fusion 360 too, so I'll put that up there as well.
All right. Okay, it's 7:30 here in the morning in Ballarat, sunny Ballarat. It's still dark outside.
Time for
of it.
breakfast then.
Time for breakfast or coffee anyway.
Pizza.
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
I'll see if I can get the video up a bit in a little while. And thank you all for your
thank you.
attention.
Thanks.
And,
Very interesting.
Yeah, it
Very
has
good.
been.
Always good.
And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah.
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 Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Well,